Did they make any other trades?
Yeah, they actually acquired a first round pick from Houston and a 2022 second round pick for by taking on Brandon Knight and Marquise Chris and giving up Alec Burke.
All right. Well, then they're making smart moves. None of these moves are going to help them win this year. They're getting some assets that are maybe not the best assets, but at least they're getting some. I'll give it a B plus.
I'm giving them an A. Yeah, I mean, and this is judging their entire trade, all four trades they've made since the start of the season. I'm giving them an A. They're literally the only team, and the other teams I'm looking at here are Atlanta, Memphis, New Orleans, which we'll get to New Orleans and Memphis in a little bit. But they're the only team that really went out, that was a rebuilding team, and acquired some salary in return for a bunch of draft assets. They did exactly what Atlanta should have done. And not only that, for Alec Burke, they were able to get a first-round pick in return. Yeah, it won't be a high first-round pick. It'll be somewhere in the 20s. But still, they were able to get a first-round pick for Alec Burke, a player they picked up literally in exchange for another 2 second-round picks and Kyle Korver. But yeah, I love the moves they did. They did exactly what they were supposed to do. Yes, they stuck themselves with a bunch of expiring contracts next season. They'll be close to the luxury tax, but I could respect their owner for willing to do that, going out and spending money already for next year in order to get some draft assets in return. So I give them an A. They did exactly what they wanted to do. They accomplished their goal. Traded literally everyone that they should have traded. I mean, they could have still traded Tristan Thompson and Jordan Clarkson, but those are two players who will be on this roster next year, and they could just trade them then. So I give them an A for what they did. Kudos for picking up a first-round pick for Alec Burke. And, yeah.
All right, now we have the Dallas Mavericks, who, of course, made the big Kristaps trade, but they also traded away Harrison Barnes for Justin Jackson and Zach Randolph. I'm going to give them a B. I like the move with getting rid of Harrison Barnes. You're going to open up a little bit of cap space. And I do
a lot of cap space.
Yeah. You're going to open up cap space, but then the team's not going to have great cap space next year. They'll have some.
You mean this upcoming offseason?
Yeah.
Oh no, they'll have a lot. Even if Kristaps resigns, takes on a contract, they'll still have about if not a max value contract, then close to a max value contract. And if Kristaps accepts the qualifying offer, they'll have even more. They'll have about 40.
Yeah, the reason I'll give this a B is because they are. I mean, I like Kristaps and I like the trade they made, but they are taking a little bit of risk just with his health in this deal because he hasn't shown us he can play a full season yet, and he's 7'3" and lanky and skinny. So those are tough. Those are players that a lot of times will get injured.
So what kind of grade did you give them?
A B.
A B? Okay, I'm giving them an A-, and I think trading Harrison Barnes, in my opinion, would have probably given them a C+. I don't know. It's definitely not a move that improves their roster, but I think that being a complimentary move to acquiring Kristaps Porzingis really boosts them up to an A- for me because of the fact that obviously alongside Kristaps Porzingis, they acquired two contracts that hindered their cap space for this upcoming offseason. Really, I mean, they would have only had about $10 million to spend should Kristaps Porzingis resign a long-term deal. So that really would not leave him with a lot of room. But now, by trading away Harrison Barnes for an expiring contract and a player on a rookie scale contract worth a little over $3 million, now that really gave him the flexibility to be active in free agency again this year. I mean, Harrison Barnes is a slightly above average player. I think that, I've heard rumors that they will pursue Nikola Vucevic. I think that makes perfect sense. I thought that made perfect sense even before I read that. So I think that's a player that they could truly not only pursue, but I think he will strongly consider playing there. So I think just for that reason, obviously, Dallas's grade is purely based off potential. Obviously, there's a lot of potential for disaster as well, but because of the high reward potential here, I will give them an A minus.
Okay, so moving on, we have the Denver Nuggets. Now, the Denver Nuggets, if I recall correctly, stayed pretty quiet. Now, again, so fine, I'll give it a C because they didn't really do anything, but I like where they're at, and I don't think there was a lot of moves for them to make.
Yeah, I'll give them not just a B minus. I think they should have stayed pat. I think maybe if there was room for an upgrade, they could have done it. But I'm not sure what type of room there was. They have such a deep team, and they are actually one of the best positioned teams for this upcoming offseason in terms of how many nice young rotational pieces they have under contract. How young, I'm sorry, I did say young already, about how many rotational pieces they have under contract, and not only that, but they're under cheap contracts. So they will really probably have another quiet offseason, but at the same time, they will be able to acquire a couple of nice players without giving anyone up because of the fact that they have some pretty costly trade exceptions. They'll be able to use their mid-level exception, especially specifically on what they choose to do with Paul Millsap. They'll be in solid position to resign him over the next 3-4 years for a cheaper contract than he's worth now. So they're really in a very good position for this upcoming offseason. I think staying pat was the correct move. Maybe if they could have consolidated on some of their depth, that would have been nice, but I don't know if that was available, so B minus here. I think it's a little above average just because of the fact that they stayed pat and that being a smart choice.
Okay, now we have Detroit Pistons. Now, the Detroit Pistons made the Stanley Johnson trade a little bit early before the trade deadline. And I do know that they made another trade, right?
Yeah, they traded Reggie Bullock for Svi Mikhailuk and a second-round pick.
Yeah, so I'll give them a B minus. The trades they made, they kind of had to. I mean, I like the pickup of Svi Mikhailuk. I mean, we don't know what he's going to be, but I don't think getting rid of Reggie Bullock and Stanley Johnson, who it seems like they had no intention of re-signing, is a bad idea.
Yeah, I give them a B plus, and I know Detroit had aspirations of making the playoffs, and I'm pretty sure I guess they still do, especially because of the fact that they just signed Wayne Ellington. But I will give them a B plus for the two moves that they make, simply because those two moves, even though they definitely made the roster a little worse for this year, and I don't think they should be even trying to make the playoffs, but that's, I guess, story for another day. But I guess they realized that too because of the fact that they made the roster a little worse. But the two players they acquired, so they traded away two expiring contracts, players that would have been paid this summer, not paid superstar level money, but Reggie Bullock should easily be able to command $6 to $7 million on the open market. Stanley Johnson will probably make still about $5 to $6 million just based off his potential. Might not be a long-term deal, but that's probably what he's worth in free agency this summer. And that would have put Detroit in that would have given Detroit some luxury tax problems. And by picking up Thon McCurr and Svi Mikhailuk and a second-round pick, they essentially acquired two players on guaranteed contracts for next season, which is exactly what they should have been doing. And that exactly was their plan here. And now they are less likely to be paying the luxury tax next year, and they still were able to acquire two nice, young, solid rotational pieces. Even if, depending on how, we'll have to see obviously how they do. Even if they are projects, they should be rotational pieces for next year. So I give them a B plus just because of the fact that they were able to acquire players on guaranteed contracts for next season, which is actually what I suggested they should have done in my articles.
All right, so then we have the Golden State Warriors, who made no trades, and as they shouldn't. Them to make trades is also pretty difficult, and I know they like keeping their picks because they're able to get some cheap contracts that way. So I will give them a B.
Yeah, I'm going to give them a C plus. Staying pat, yes, for the most part, the correct thing to do. I think that they should have considered trading their pick for some depth. here for a bench piece alongside probably Sean Livingston too. I think Sean Livingston will not be with the team past this season because of the fact that at least if they are able to resign Durant and Thompson, just because he's on a partially guaranteed contract for next season, but I don't think they'll want to pay $8 million to Sean Livingston next season if they're already if they already have a huge salary. If their salary cap is already huge, after resigning Durant and Thompson, I don't think they'll want to keep Sean Livingston, and I think they could have packaged him alongside a first-round pick for at least a nice bench piece or two. So just for that reason, I think I will give them a C+. I will not go as high as Denver just because I think they had more reason to make a trade than the Nuggets did, just because they need some depth.
Okay, so now we have the Houston Rockets, okay, so one of the trades I know they traded away James Ennis.
Yeah, they traded away James Ennis. They acquired Iman Shumpert essentially in exchange for Brandon Knight, Marquise Chris, a first-round pick, and a second-round pick, but they did also acquire a second-round pick here. It's essentially a Houston second-rounder for a Milwaukee second-rounder. This is in the future too, but both picks at least don't project to be anywhere in the top 50, so they really pretty much are irrelevant. And like you said, they traded away James Ennis. In that Iman Shumpert trade, they also acquired Nick Stauskas and Wade Baldwin, and then traded them. Poor guys were on 4 teams this past week, but traded them away alongside a second-round pick to Indiana for salary cap relief. You go first with this one because I have my opinions about Houston.
Well, I like the Iman Shumpert addition. I think the Houston Rockets have been improving themselves throughout the year. Now, I don't like how they handled their offseason, which I thought was a bigger mistake, but when it comes to how they started this season and how the team they have now, I think it's a better team, so I'm going to give them a B.
I'm giving them an F. I hate this Dan Warner. He is such a cheapskate. This guy could have easily gone and picked up a better player than Iman Shumpert by simply taking on a contract for next season, but he is so cheap that he goes and picks up what is available in terms of expiring contracts. He could have easily improved this team. Yes, he would have had to pay up, but if he is really willing to win a championship, which I think he's full of crap when he says that he's going to do anything to help his team win a championship. No, and granted, I don't even know if I should give him enough just because of the fact that he was able to cut his luxury tax bill by a hefty amount. I will give him credit for that, but just because of how cheap he is. James Ennis was a rotational piece for them. He traded away for nothing. He gave up second-round picks just to shed some salary of Nick Stauskas and Zach Baldwin. What a cheapskate. I can't stand this guy. Yes, the signings of Austin Rivers and Fareed were good. We'll give him that. I'll give him credit for that. Picking those guys up from the waiver line there, but this owner is such a cheapskate. I hope Houston loses in the second round of the playoffs. I can't stand what he does for this team. He's unwilling to spend the money to help this team win a championship. If I was James Harden, I'd run as quick as I can.
Okay, so after the Houston Rockets, we have the Indiana Pacers. Now, the Indiana Pacers, if I recall correctly, did not make any moves.
Well, it's the one I just mentioned, where they acquired Nick Stauskas and Zach Baldwin alongside a second-round pick to provide Houston with some salary cap relief. They're waiving both players, so really they just acquired a second-round pick.
Yeah, okay, and they were kind of put in this bad situation when Oladipo got injured. So I will say that, I'll give them about a C because they didn't really have many of the options. Now, they could have thought about either trading Sabonis or Turner. But with the Oladipo injury, I think that should be put off to see if maybe they can improve in the summer in some way. I feel like the Mike Conley trade can still make sense in the summer if Oladipo will be back to full health.
Yeah, and I give him a B for staying pat. I guess they could have also traded Corey Joseph, Tariq Evans, looked into trading them. I don't know what would have been available. A second round pick, which they ended up acquiring anyway. from Houston. So, like you said, you made a real good point. Conley will be available in the summer. The trade will make perfect sense